Athena and the olive tree and other Greek myths. Athena and the olive tree, and who is the fairest one of all? And the woman no one believed. By Geraldine McCaughrean, illustrated by Tony Ross. Athena and the olive tree. Zeus's headache got worse and worse, until one day he said, "My head is splitting." And he was right. A great throbbing crest swelled across the crown on his head, and when he smacked his fist against it, it split open. Out rose a woman. She was fully grown, fully dressed, fully armed. In fact, she was clad in armor, with helmet, shield and spear. And she came into the world along a shoot of light so dazzling that, for a time, no one in the courts of heaven could move or speak or think, except to think. A new goddess has been born today. The disk of heaven and the disk of earth trembled like cymbals struck together, and Helios stopped the sun chariot stock still in the sky, to stare. The goddess's mouth was open, and a battle cry set the fish shimmering in the sea far below. Then the warrior woman closed her mouth, struck the pavements of Olympus 3 times with the butt of her spear, and freed the gods from their trance, like washed sleepwalkers startled awake. Her eyes were a silver gray, and when she looked at her father, Zeus knew at once how long she had lain nestled against his brain, unborn. "You are the daughter of Métis, my first wife," he said, his amazement mixed with delight. Suddenly the prophecy that Métis's child would be greater than him no longer seemed such a terrible threat to Zeus. He had always imagined a son. So Zeus did not open his mouth and swallow her, as he had swallowed her mother. He did not banish her from heaven. In fact, from the day of her birth, she was his dearest child, Pallas Athena. "Dear Grey Eyes," he calls her, said Poseidon, as sour and surly as ever among the draughty currents of the deep sea. The others call her Mighty, Champion, the warlike one, protector of little children. Goddess of the city. Well, she won't be goddess of my city, and she needn't think she will. By his city, Poseidon meant the marvelous city being built by King Cecrops as a lesson to the world in civilized living. In time it would be home to thousands, with a host of lovely buildings, senate houses, theaters, covered markets and bathhouses. At present it had 2 rivers and the Acropolis, a hill of resplendent beauty just waiting to be crowned with a temple. But to which of the gods would King Cecrops dedicate his perfect city? "It's only 4 miles from the sea." "Of course it must be mine," said Poseidon, striking his trident on the floor of heaven. "And yet I would rather like it myself," said the gray-eyed goddess standing beside Zeus's throne. Zeus wanted Athena to have it, but thought it best to ask King Cecrops to choose. After all, the man had taught humankind how to worship the gods properly, so he would clearly make a wise choice. And he could take the blame, rather than Zeus, for offending either Poseidon or Athena. Cecrops was sent for and asked, "Which god shall be patron of your new city, and give it its name, and have their temple on the hill of the Acropolis? Shall it be Poseidon or gray-eyed Athena?" Cecrops plucked at his lower lip and considered. He could see the barbs of Poseidon's trident twinkling, see the eagle glisten on the breastplate of Athena's armor. "I shall dedicate the city to whomsoever grants it the most useful present." Hardly were the words spoken before Poseidon drove off full tilt in his turtle's hell chariot. He split the sea asunder as he entered it, and galloped in frantic circles around the amphitheater of the undersea, so as to set the ocean spinning. Up from his stables came his white-maned storm horses, clashing their silver hoofs, stampeding over the sea's surface with arched necks and flaring nostrils. Choosing the very finest of his steeds, Poseidon molded its watery bulk into solid horseflesh, and led it ashore on an Aegean beach, the world's first horse of flesh and blood. "This beast I give you, Cecrops, and all its 4-footed foals forevermore. From now on, your merchants may transport their goods in horse-drawn wagons, your soldiers charge into battle on horseback, your farmers plow their fields without a pick." Cecrops stood and clapped. He could imagine no better present. And behind him the gods and goddesses of Olympus, ranged like the judges at a trial, were clearly just as impressed. Poseidon's city it would be. Then, all of a sudden, Athena was standing on the crest of the hill of the Acropolis, spear in hand. No, no. This time it was not a spear she was holding, but a little tree. As she thrust it into the ground, it grew and spread its branches, leaves the shape of a spearhead, and fruit as green and black as grapes. "This is the olive tree," she said. "You may eat its fruit or crush it and make gib oil to cook by, to light your houses, tea to flavor your meat and bread. Its leaves are soft to sleep on, its shade is cool as water at noon." And once Cecrops had tasted the olive, he had to agree that life would never be the same again for anyone whose land contained the olive tree. "The name of my city will be Athena," said King Cecrops, "and the temple on the Acropolis shall be the Parthenon, temple to the immortal maiden Athena." A rumble shook the assembly of dignitaries which seemed to come from far beneath the earth, but which really came from Poseidon's throat. He growled the growl of a ship foundering, of a sea monster grating its teeth, of the boulders at the bottom of the sea grinding each other to sand. Then his hand jerked and his trident flew and struck the hill of the Acropolis like the flank of a whale. Out of the wound spurted salt water, not just a spring but a fountain, a geyser, a gusher of seawater pluming into the sky then falling back on the heads of the assembled immortals. Soon the ground was muddy, the puddles joined into lakes, and the whole coastal plain disappeared beneath a flood which stretched all the way to the sea. Huge waves rolled in off the 5 oceans, and moved on unhindered over the Thracian plain, submerging crops, destroying houses, drowning animals who could not reach higher ground. Huddled together at the top of the Acropolis, their arms round each other's waists, the Olympians and King Cecrops looked out over the greatest flood in the history of their world, and wondered at the jealousy of the sea god. "Enough! You are a sullen and peevish bully, brother," declared Zeus, pointing his aegis at the flood and drying it up in great twisting columns of steam. "You shall pay back the people of Athens for this wanton destruction of yours. In place of soft waves, you shall live for a time among hard, dry stones, and in place of your cold deeps, you may labor a while in the hot sun to earn gold as they have to do each day." And for sending the flood, Poseidon was made to spend 7 years building the walls of a city. Not Athens. It was a citadel with a wall 20 meters high and 5 meters thick of shining white stone. No weapon must breach it, no attacker scale it. It was to be the greatest fortress city in the world. It was to be Troy. Who is the fairest one of all? The race of gold,